while we do the check-in, some other people might join us. You already pressed the record button. So again, welcome everybody for this 5th webinar of the Conscious Business Ambassador Program. Let's dive right in. So first of all, it's wonderful to see you again, and it's getting dark over there and it's late, dark early. So it's definitely a season for reflection here, which we'll do a little bit today. So what we'll talk about today is basically this model of dominance and subservience, which is a little bit of a 2x4 hitting us. So we'll take a little bit more time during the next week to cover this and look at how human perception works. Clemens is going to look into that a little bit, and then also the existential decision, which were part of the last batch of videos that you received. And then to see where we move from here, how we actually can deal with this model of dominance and subservience and with our emotional system. So as usual, let's just dive right in. Let's go through a quick check-in. How do you come into this meeting? What do you feel about the material from the past 3 weeks? And let's go from the top this time. Gabriel, do you want to start?
Sure. How do I come into this meeting? In general, really excited. Like a met need for movement and inspiration. About the material, also the same feelings, but it felt like I had to pass through kind of a darker, deeper place, and so there's like reminders of that as well.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Jordan, do you want to go next?
Sure. I'm a little sick, so I come to this meeting just kind of cold meted up and just a little foggy, but ready to jump into it. I had a great discussion with Aaron yesterday, and we had a small little discussion group, and just again, I think echoing Gabriel, just excited for today's discussion. I think the content this past week has been I don't know if heavy is the right word, but just a lot to think about. It's a lot to wrap your head around, but so excited to go through this webinar today to just reflect on what we've been doing for the last couple weeks.
Great. Thanks, Jordan. Some people joined, so let's go with Carmen next. She's up on top.
Okay, that's right in the middle. In the middle after a very busy day, so I've already, and so I have to to join you in my thoughts as well. So I'm still a little bit
in a different world.
With other thoughts.
Yeah,
so.
That's why we do this check-in. Thanks.
Yeah.
Christine, you want to go next?
Hello, yes. Hello, everyone. And I have missed this meeting, so I'm really excited that we're having it today. And I'm looking forward to discussing what we've been learning. I love the dominance and subservience understanding, because it's like a continuous dance in life. As I look across everything in life, really, I can see that much more vividly than I've been able to before. So I really enjoyed learning. So I'm doing well. I'm excited about the material and about our session today. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. And Conscious Business World Summit would be Aaron. Do you want to go next? Say hi.
Yeah, sure. Hello, everybody. Sorry, I haven't been on some of the previous calls. And the Conscious Business World Summit's auto login for our virtual or for our Zoom account. So hence the name. I'm feeling good. I have some big things unfolding here. I had a really nice conversation with Jordan yesterday. In the past 3 weeks have been really, really good exploration for me with the material and both personally as well.
Great. Thank you. Jess.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Hey, Aaron, too. Nice to see you. So I was really taken by the existential decision piece and really digging into that. So that was enlightening, not only for myself, but then other important people in my life. And I also, just a caveat, brought the whole DQ discussion to my team, which was really dynamic and interesting to start to unpack that and bring some of that context to the team. So going back a few weeks, but a lot of value just in this experience in general, and really excited to be here today on a holiday week for those of us in the US, and great, robust discussion to come, I'm sure.
So, thank you. Thank you. And Julia.
Hello. I come to this meeting, what do I say? I'm excited and inspired by having had the opportunity to spend some time with some people this morning, just talking about purpose and how important it was and how crucial it was in terms of changing business. So I was feeling very inspired and motivated, and then just spent the last 2 hours going through the video before the call, and now I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed and like, brain fog with the material, and excited to dig into it. And yet again, I can feel the resistance coming up to doing that.
Mm-hmm. Welcome to the club. Yeah. Thanks. Michael.
Yes, hi everyone. Yes, I'm feeling excited, also a little bit sleepy because of the dark nights here. But still very curious to see how this develops, and seeing more and more how important it is to know yourself and to know what's going around you in order to shift both yourself and others. But it's great to make later on these connections, so that they fit into your mind in one way or another.
All right, thank you. And Moshe, finally.
Hi everyone. I don't know if you can see me or hear me.
Yep.
So yeah, I'm happy to be with everyone this evening. Continue that work. I have nothing smart to say.
Great realization for the moment. Thanks for helping us out with that. All right, thanks, Moshe. So let's dive right in. Let's look at this model of dominance and subservience. I think, or at least I hope it has become clear that oftentimes when we think about transforming business, if we think about building conscious business, we oftentimes think about this spiritual growth part and everything be conscious, etc. And we oftentimes forget this growing up part. And I hope it has become clear to you that if we don't look at this growing up part, I don't think much is going to change, because these behaviors are so ingrained in our world, and we can all do all these spiritual growth things. If we don't look at our out of power behaviors, our fear-based behaviors, and they kick us in the butt or kick other people in the butt, then we really can't expect too much to change here. I believe, or I see that this is this challenging material to look at, but if we want to transform businesses or our relationship or countries or our educational system, I truly believe that we need to take this material into consideration. There are two things that I would like to mention as a kind of a frame here that I would like to make clear. The first thing is that I don't want to point fingers with this material. I don't think anybody wants to point fingers with this material and make anybody feel judged or guilty or whatever it is. It's really to just open the box to allow a view into what's happening in our human behavior. The second thing that I would like to say is that we obviously don't operate all the time that way, but that we just roll along nicely and everything is fine. But when we are operating from fear or from fantasy, then this model or another model that you might gel with better kicks in and takes over our behaviors. And that we have to become accountable and responsible for that if we want to make a difference in our own world and the world around us. So let me just recap a few things about the model of dominant subservience so we are all on the same page here. The first thing is that, again, when there's a trigger event, it's either fear or fantasy that prompts the model of dominance and subservience. This was, years ago, that was a real surprise for me that fantasy was in there. Because in our new age paradigm, oftentimes people say, just think positively, just think everything's okay, and go out and follow your bliss. And I don't believe it's quite that simple. Because quite frankly, I've met with many people that went out and just founded their companies and say, I'm just following this and I'm following this fantasy, and they're struggling enormously. So a fantasy oftentimes is fear-based to avoid looking at our issues. So most of us are aware that fear is oftentimes the driver for our out-of-power behaviors, but fantasy can be the same thing. The second thing is the model of dominance and subservience, and this is the fundamental shift that we can make, is based on the scarcity mindset. There's not enough of what we need in the world. It might be money, it might be love, it might be safety, it might be whatever you think is not enough of. And this scarcity thinking dominates our thinking. And whenever we are dropped into this scarcity thinking, this model of dominance and subservience kicks into gear. So obviously there are scarce situations in our world. So the question becomes, how can we deal with that, and how can we shift even in those critical situations? Even maybe when we're sitting in prison and we don't have freedom, even then maybe we can shift into an abundance mindset of where we might actually feel a sense of freedom. So how is that possible? That's something that we will explore. The third thing that I want to mention is, once our model of dominant subservient kicks in, our existential decision is triggered. And our existential decision is something that we're carrying around, which is basically considered a life or death situation, which is helpful if we are standing in front of a tiger or a car rushes in front of us and we jump out of the way. But it is not helpful if our little yellow light in our car goes on, we need to get gas and we're on reserve and we think, oh my God, we're freaking out, I have to find a gas station. Or when somebody in traffic cuts us off, or when our boss looks at us not in a positive way. To think of a life or death situation in those situations is really not a helpful reaction. The fourth thing is that as we jump into this model of dominance and subservience, we stop being present and we start influencing and manipulating the situation around us in some kind of way. Or alternatively, we suppress ourselves, we kind of go into depression mode and check out. But the most important thing is that we stop feeling what's right there in the present moment. We are disconnected from the present moment. And with that, we're disconnected from ourselves, and we are disconnected from the people around us. So if you consider that really the success in our life is dependent on the relationships that we have to ourselves, to money, to the people around us, to whoever it might be, but the success is really a reflection of the relationships that we have. We can only build positive relationships if we are in the present moment. If we're disconnected from ourselves to our feelings to the other person, we can't really build really connected relationships. So this model is very, very central to really building success in our own life. The next point is, once we are triggered by our existential decision, and this is really helpful to have because it is a litmus test, we revert back to the conditioned emotions, which is shame, blame, guilt, outrage, pity, or self-pity, which we revert to both on the dominant or the subservient side. Just as a recap, imagine a boss that shames his people, he blames his people, he makes them feel guilty, he's outraged that they're not fully there, for example. Or he even pities them and gives them something. That's an out-of-power behavior that manipulates the situation. But the same behaviors are true when we're at the water cooler, when we're talking about our boss and we're blaming him and we feel guilty that we're not good enough, or we feel shameful, or we are outraged about him. So these five emotions are very, very helpful to detect whenever we ourselves or the people around us are operating out of power. and to just sit back and say, okay, now wait, let's take a deep breath here before we move on and make any decisions. And the last point I would like to make is that basically when we revert, let's go back to this fifth point here real quick. When we go back to our conditions emotions, our life is governed by a story that's made up between our ears. Yeah, so there's a story that guy is not good enough, I'm not good enough, etc., etc. We're not based in the present moment anymore. And as a matter of fact, we don't feel our authentic emotions anymore. What's really going on inside of us, where there's no story attached. We might just feel sadness, we might just feel confusion, we might just feel afraid without a story being attached to it. Yeah. When we feel our present emotions, there's a power in that. So imagine if somebody in your life passes away that you love. We have two options. We can either go into feeling guilty or feeling pity or feeling, I don't know what, maybe even blame. And you can see that this behavior will never stop. You can still feel blame, you can still feel guilty, you can still feel self-pity until you're 80 years old and nothing will change. Yeah. So operating on the basis of conditioned emotions doesn't change anything if we blame other people, etc. Once we go to the level of authentic emotions, once we actually sit with our deep, deep sadness that we have lost somebody, this can transform because it's actually a rich experience that we have. We can feel a richness in the sadness that we feel. There's an aliveness in that sadness that we feel. And that sadness can transform into love. It can actually pass eventually through our bodies and transform into love. This is how we transform our emotional system. But we'll touch on that at a later stage as well. So a couple of takeaways that I would like you to have as from this model of dominant subservience. Basically, whenever we have struggle and stress in our life, or we see struggle and stress in the life around us, just open the media, listen to the news, listen to our politicians, etc., and you see what governs our reality, and that there's a lot of dominance and subservience going on right now. I want to give you one more example from a coaching session that I had. I was working with a person at BMW, as a matter of fact. He was one of the head designers there. And we were running through a bigger program. And as part of that, we were coaching each other, or I was coaching him. And at some point in time, he just came up to me and said, Peter, I need to have a conversation with you. My boss came up to me yesterday and said, I need to let him know by Monday, it was Thursday at this time, 4 people that I need to let go. So he basically called me up and said, we need to cut costs by 20%. I want you to let me know 4 people that you will will let go by Monday. So I talked to him and said, you know what? I can't really let 4 people go because we are already totally stressed out. We are absolutely maxed out. But the boss just said, I don't care. Let me know who you want to let go. We need to cut cost. Bam, no more conversation. He tried to call him up a couple more times, but there was no response. So by the time he called me on Friday, he was absolutely devastated. After about 18 years with the organization, he considered leaving the organization. That's how frustrated he was. He said, if this was my organization, I would put my house, I would refinance my house in order to keep these people. That's how important they are on my team. So what can I do? I tried everything. So what we did is basically, I listened to his conversation and I basically asked him, have you ever heard him, what he was feeling, what he was needing from you? And what is that actually? So I asked him and he said, well, he needs to cut 20% of costs. And I asked you, have you ever reflected that need to him? Have you ever been present with him in that? And he said, no, I was just so pissed about the situation. So we spent most of the coaching situation drafting basically a statement to his boss, which included his feelings and his needs and what was really going on inside of him. And it sounded something like that. When I hear you say that I have to let go, or when I hear that I have to let go 4 people by Monday morning, I really feel frustrated and concerned about the sustainability of our people and the quality of our work. I need to understand how we can save the 20%, so hear the other person, and make our product sustainable and our team sustainable. I have an idea how we can do that. Can we have a conversation? Within 5 minutes, he received a call back and they found a solution where nobody was let go. So this approach, this understanding when we fall into this model of dominance and subservience is absolutely powerful. We might not always find a solution when we get back into the present moment and speak to the other person from our present feelings, but the conversation will always change. And in his case, it was obviously a very, very profound change for 4 people in his team. Yeah. But the second point that I'm writing on the slide here is once we disconnect from the present moment, we just don't have the possibility to stay connected with ourselves and with the other person. And then separation happens. Okay. I would like to step back for 1 minute here and kind of look at this model and explain how we usually work in organizations with this model, because it's quite heavy stuff, as you've experienced. So just a couple of comments about this. The first one is that when we work with individuals, like a coaching assignment where we take people through this entire approach, what we oftentimes do is we start with module 1 with the first part, where it's about the authentic power, people learn about themselves. And then we jump to module 2 or module 3, where it is about building a purpose-driven culture or about building more effective teams, for example. There is always an opening as part of these conversations where stuff hits the fan, where the person realizes, my God, there's one stumbling stone to make anything work. Let's say you want to build a purpose-driven culture. Suddenly you're afraid to speak out openly what your purpose is to everybody else. And boom, we go back to the model of dominance and subservience. So we wait for the opening to address these issues with the individual once they are ready to listen. If we are doing it in a workshop or in a team setting, for example, we just did one at one company. What we go is we basically take people through this entire module as a team. And we obviously frame this model of dominance and subservience, give them a little bit of a heads up and a warning that it can be quite tough. But once they go into it, they, as a group, usually digest it very, very powerfully. And they start adopting the terms, they start seeing what's happening in their work. So we basically see the context and go through this model, and then we take it to a deeper level in individual coaching sessions if we can. Yeah. But what I found is that as groups go through this model and then have a discussion around it, there's a profound change happening within the groups as the awareness grows. Okay. Let's take a little break here and just a few questions, opening up to questions. Do you have any questions about this model of dominant subservience? Is this where you come in, Clemens, or oh no?
Yeah.
Do you want to do that first, or do you want to open for questions?
If nobody comes up with the questions, I can go in with the next part, and then we can have a check afterwards.
Yeah, just let's check in. Are there any questions from you guys?
Christine and Gabriel.
Hi, it's Christine.
Yeah.
Christine,
go ahead.
Okay, I wanted to see if you could elaborate a little bit more on the fantasy part, Peter. I certainly understand the fear, but just a little bit more about what you mean by that and how that manifests.
I'll give you an example. We actually, there's a lady that's contacted us, and she said she was in the telecommunications industry. She got out of it based on a dream that she was here to found an organization. And she's been trying that for the past 6-7 years, and it's about building a global network of centers. When she talks about it, there are no roots. There's a vision, and the tree might be beautiful, but there are no roots that could make this work. And having that conversation, you feel that in a minute that it will never work, because there are no roots in what she's created. So basically, a tree top without the roots is just a fantasy. So she's struggling very hard because she's living out this vision that she has and trying to do it, make it work in some way, but there's no, it just doesn't work out. It just doesn't stick with people because it's based on a fantasy that it's not rooted in our three-dimensional world. Let's put it that way. Does that help, Christine?
It does. It does help.
Okay. Gabriel, did you have another question?
Yeah, when I was doing the exercises on this part, model dominance and subservience, I had trouble coming up with situations, and that's when I realized that I have actively avoided situations where I have someone over me. And I looked back at my work history, and I had to go pretty far to find like a boss in that sense, right? And one example was a professor who gave me a grade I didn't agree with, but that I just got to look back over my my work experience and realize that even when I did work for someone, I was kind of a free agent. I was a external consultant. I felt free, and so I just thought that was interesting. And then so how do I apply this model when I'm actively avoiding being in that position of having someone being the dominant one? I had lots of experiences where I took the dominant role in that dominant subservient relationship, but I couldn't come up with many where I was subservient, where I was taking the subservient role.
Do you ever feel that you're concerned about being appreciated?
Definitely.
Valued or seen by the other person?
Yeah, for sure.
So take that. I don't want to go into much more detail here, but can you see that that's where you might be shrinking in your progression?
Like needing that, not thinking so much that I'm being ordered to or commanded to, or but that I'm
very subtle
placing that person above me to give me appreciation, acceptance, that kind of thing.
Yes.
If
I give you an example about myself because I can, and we run the same colors here. So violets in our color combination, appreciation is a big issue. Yeah. So we want to be seen, we want to be appreciated, and my personal issue is value. So being rejected, etc. So whenever I feel an issue or I'm working with people that don't see me or don't appreciate me, I feel myself falling into this model. I have a tendency to fall into this model. So I try to please. I try to make it right. I try to be perfect. I try to do all these kind of things, which is a manipulative behavior. Yeah. So I'm subservient to that person that might judge me.
Okay. That's the subtler than I guess I was picturing it. But yeah, it totally resonates.
Yeah. Okay. Hope that helps.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else? Any more questions? Thoughts? Clemens, you've got something on your tongue there that wants to come out, or what?
Yeah, I was thinking a bit. If we take the words dominant and subservient, I think we all typically associate them with very strong situations. But the basic movement on the one hand is to move towards something that we believe we need, that we believe nurtures us, and we want it from others. So pleasing is a very subservient behavior, actually, if it is not come freely decided, but if it's an automatic behavior. Yeah, and we reject what we believe endangers us, our identity, and that doesn't need to be on a physical level. It can be the identity of being a freelancer, or it can be the identity of being a man or a woman or whatever we identify with. Yeah, and then we get aggressive because we want to keep that, and that is easily a very dominant behavior. And so we can substitute the terms dominant and subservient with aggression for one thing and pleasing on the other hand, for instance. And then you can maybe extend your perspective on that.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Cool. Does anybody else have problems finding situations?
I mean, isn't this model constant in any organization that you can find of? I mean, with several layers of management, isn't you're basically subservient to your manager? Definitely not 100% of the time, but it's or take even the military organization, which is based on hierarchies.
Yeah.
I mean, how historic isn't that? Constantly being subservient and depending on what rank or whatever you have. So I think it's embedded all over.
Yeah, well, I see it all over, and very much present at many times. But it doesn't really have to do with hierarchy. Yeah, I believe that hierarchies can be very healthy if they are done in the right way. If you have servant leadership or if you have leaders that are actually empowered, it does not need to happen. Yeah, but in our current hierarchies, in the way we lead organization, it's very much present from what I see.
And I can give a personal example on this, maybe. I did live in Japan for a while and worked there. And you may know that the Japanese like the bow to other people, and depending on where they perceive other people in the hierarchy or in that moment, the bow is deeper, or it's just a little bow. And being a German, in the beginning, it was very strange. And then when I was actually doing my MBA before I moved to Japan, I was in Monterey and I did my MBA there. And the father of my girlfriend, who was Japanese, came to visit. And I don't know whether he knew that we were boyfriend and girlfriend or not, but I drove them around. I was their chauffeur. And at the end, he made really literally a 90-degree bow. And to me, it felt very, very strange. It felt like subservient behavior. But when I was living in Japan later on, I realized that I can do this 90-degree bow, but from an inner strength, not being subservient, but just showing my respect to the other person. So what may look like subservient on the outside, actually from the inside is not at all subservient. It is just a form that we use to interact. And so in a hierarchy, I can do the same, but I'm not being subservient or not dominating in the other way. Mm-hmm. Maybe that clarifies a bit.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. Yeah, so generally I want to say a couple of things. Is really we are all dealing with the same issues in this world and the same struggles. This model might feel very personal. Oh my God, I'm out of power in this way. I have this struggle with this relationship, etc. But I want you to take a little bit of a distance from that and realize that it's really the human condition, and not to take it personal, but to say, just open the black box and say, this is how we all behave as human beings here. And that we're basically all in the same boat, and that we can support each other in that. And to ask ourselves if we build relationships or even organizations in the way where we are aware of what's happening, and that we can support us in healing our emotional system, how would that be? How beautiful could that be if we can show that vulnerability and then actually support each other in that? Yeah, so if you just become aware about this model of dominant subservience in the emotional system, I ask you to give yourself space to just see it, to calm down inside of yourself, and by that, just observe and allow the other person to do the same instead of freaking out. Yeah, and provide a space for yourself and maybe for the other person as well, and be gentle with yourself. Okay, it's just something that I wanted to throw in here, maybe as a couple of final words after the questions. Let's move on. Clemens, you want to?
Just one more thing, if it's possible.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Mm-hmm.
Just a clarification about, like, in general, basically every behavior which is not authentic, which means like you are preoccupied with what people will think about you, or all other conditions, this is basically also the same concept of being a subservient? I mean, is that the same idea?
Yes.
Is it different, or is the same concept?
It's the same concept. Yeah, I mean, we perceive something. Clemens is going to say something in a minute. What's going to happen in our mind actually? But when we perceive something, and the question is what Clemens said, we can still have our own respect and bow, yeah, and react to that situation from an in power perspective, or we can choose to go out of power, or sometimes it's been chosen for us, and we do it from a perspective of where we're not in our center. Yeah, where we are operating from fear, where we are pleasing somebody, etc. And simply the awareness of that changes the situation already. It might not heal it, but it changes the situation. Yeah, because we're back in the present moment with that awareness.
And I think it may become a bit more clear after the next few slides.
Yeah, let's dive right in.
And so this is the first one in this program, actually, because I did it at a presentation last week. Basically, I think you probably all have been in a situation. This is Shibuya Crossing in Japan. It's one of the busiest, frenziest places I have been to. But there were days when I was standing at that crossing or walking over that crossing, and I felt a very deep inner peace and inner calm. And I would guess you have been in similar situations where the outside world was very busy, very frenzy, and for some reason inside you felt very peaceful and very much in your own power, and with no need to dominate or be subservient or do anything at all but what needs to be done. And then Peter, if you could give me the next one. And there's the other side where actually we are in a very calm and peaceful environment. This one is in the Alps, and where the environment is not giving us any cause to be frenzied inside, to be at unease inside, and there is no danger, no imminent threat. But for some reason, we really are thinking, we are worrying, we are doubtful, we can't find our inner peace. And I would bet you all know this situation from one or another situation in your life. If not, tell us afterwards, because we'll do a bit of a check-in afterwards. So what I'm going to present next, and Peter, if you could go there, is a model on how this actually works in us humans. And then you can see on the left-hand side, the outer world, our environment, what we perceive as our environment. And as human beings, we all perceive our environment basically with our 5 human senses. For a bee, it's different. For a dolphin, it's different. For an ant, it's different. But as human beings, we can see, we can hear, we can smell, we can taste, and we can use our whole body to feel. Not just taste, not just touching, but our whole body is a feeling instrument. That's our body sense. And we get the input of what is going on outside through these 5 senses. And then, Peter, if you could, exactly. Then we have our inner world. And we take this inner world as reality. We believe that what we perceive on the inner world is the actual reality out there. But it is not. Because in the inner world, and this is a model I found in a training based in Tibetan Buddhism, in inner science of mind and phenomena of the yogis and of the Buddhists. So we have a concept that automatically kicks in. If you look at the image that you see of Peter or whoever you have there, you will automatically, without even thinking about it, sort that person, or if you look at me, there will be this concept man. And if it's a woman, there will automatically be the concept woman. Yeah. Then you may have had some person that is looking like me in your life as a teacher, or maybe it was your uncle or somebody. And depending on how you relate to that person, you create a different mental image. It may be a nice, a positive mental image, or it may be a negative mental image. So it influences your mental feeling. Because if that person, if it was your teacher and that teacher was somebody who supported you, it will help, looking at me will actually create in you probably a bit of a positive feeling, because that old experience will come up. If it was somebody who punished you, then it will have rather a negative impact. And on the very base, we have a self-feeling. And here at the Conscious Business Institute, we say we're in power or we are out of power. We feel good about ourselves without even thinking. It's a very basic fundamental feeling. Do we feel good about ourselves? Or do we feel vulnerable in ourselves, out of power? And as you can see, that is a bit of a circle on the right-hand side. So if we get emotional, in particular, if we get into these conditioned emotions that Peter mentioned before, then we are staying on the right-hand side. We are losing the connection to our 5 senses. And with that, we are losing the connection to the outside world. If we manage to keep that connection, then we are much more in contact with reality as it is happening actually and indeed. But if our concepts are very strong and our self-feeling is out of power, then we have these negative spirals in ourselves. Mm-hmm. And these three fields behind it is our individual experiences, is our collective experiences, and the experience of the universe, you could say. So all that, of course, comes into play as well. Let's go to the next one. Thanks, Peter. And really just bring up the other 2 parts as well. Thank you. This is, oh, and I added 2 more, So basically on the left-hand side, you would have person A. On the right-hand side, you have person B. And as human beings, we all have the same mechanism. We have this inner world, or you could call it our 6th mind, and we have the outer world and the 5 sense minds with which we are perceiving reality. If we go back to the sense minds, to really how we are perceiving with our eyes, our ears, our nose, our mouth, and our body, then we have the shared human reality. That's what we can share all. But the concepts are different. So this is where we are different, and the experience we have behind it are different as well. And to give you an example, where we can clash is like a very basic concept is man and woman. And if you're very strong in that concept, if you really say, this is a man, you may say a man is better at analytical work. A woman is better at handling emotional situations. And suddenly you have a man in front of you who actually is in tune with emotions and really good in dealing with emotions. And you may have a woman in front of you who is very good in analytical skills. So if person A is very much stuck into the concepts, saying a man is good at analytical work, but the man in front of that person is actually bad at analytical work, but very good in emotional understanding, then these 2 people easily clash, because at least one is stuck in concepts. Maybe both are stuck in concepts. And so you have a fight, you have a conflict going on, or you simply have a misunderstanding in that world. And this is what I wanted to give you. And we had this question, how do we get back into contact with each other? And one of the very basic things is to realize where we employ concepts. And we do it all the time, even if we just look behind. Peter is sitting in a chair. And without saying the word chair, we know that he's sitting in a chair, right? And he has glasses in his hands. Or I have earphones here. And you don't need to mention that. And there's a concept already coming in. This is what I wanted to share on that side, to give you another explanation. So if our conceptual mind is very strong, we are stuck in these concepts, and we are out of power, then we get into these toxic cycles on that side. If we move back into our senses, if you just feel something, whatever you have, feel it, and just go for the feeling without naming it, then you can lower your concepts and you can come back into reality. If you feel your body, if you get close to how you are feeling yourself, then the concepts get less strong and we perceive reality more as it actually is.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Does that make sense?
Thanks. Yeah. Do you have any questions, guys, about this? Any thoughts or questions? All right. Thanks, Clemens. Just shedding a different light on what we're talking about here. Let's move on to the existential decisions then. That's the second part. This is brings it down a little bit more concrete how it plays out in our life. Let me just recap a couple of things here. So basically, our existential decisions come from way back, where we basically harbor three fears as human beings: power, safety, and value. That we are getting love from the tribe, that we are being safe if a tiger attacks us, and that we have enough power to fight for food, for example, or to get food for the tribe, for example. Every one of us has one of these existential decisions, which translate into what's written down here, that I'm rejected, I reject this body, I reject this plane. So in my case, I'm rejected, which basically means that every single situation that I experience as stress and struggle or fear, I can lead back to this point: I'm rejected. Even, I think I mentioned that in the video, when I'm stuck in a traffic jam in Los Angeles at some point in time, and I stop for a moment and say, what's really going on here? Where do I want to be instead? I start asking questions, and I come to the point, well, either I want to be on a mountaintop, I don't want to be stuck in traffic, which is fine enough, or I want to be working so I can move my business forward. I can get to the point, why would I need to do that? Because if I don't do more, then I'm going to be not good enough and I'm going to be rejected. Yeah. So even a simple situation as getting pissed off by a traffic jam I can with a few questions, I can go back to my existential decision. This has been extremely helpful for me, because there are always 50 things flying around in our world that we might need to work on or what we want to improve. But if I can bring this down to one single thing, everything of those, I can work with that. Secondly, if we have this one existential decision and we can work on that, then there's a ripple effect in all other areas of our life. If we can gain our authentic power back in those situations about where I feel rejected, and get back into authentic power around that, then I can build my relationships, my job, my situation with money, clients, and all these kind of things will have an effect as a result of me gaining power in that situation. Yeah, so it's a very powerful approach, but it is working on the root of stuff. A couple of things I would like to mention. How do you deal with your existential decision? In my experience, it really doesn't require so much doing at all, because it's happening on a being level rather than a doing level. So the being conscious about it and to observe what's really happening inside of us is 50% of getting you there, even more probably. If we don't get conscious, if we don't know what's happening around us, we're on the roller coaster and life is taking us places. Once we become conscious, we can do something. We can stop making decisions, for example. The second thing that we can do is we can say stop. That's what I did, for example, in that traffic jam in Los Angeles. I stopped the car, I stopped the radio, I stopped everything. I drove off the track and I just sat. And I took time and actually looked at what was going on inside of me. And I asked the questions, where would I want to be instead? I don't like traffic jams. Why am I getting upset here? What do I want to do instead? So by asking questions, we can trace it back to our existential decision. We can look at how the conditioned authentic emotions are running our life. I'm blaming myself, I feel guilty, I'm all these kind of things. So as we ask questions, we open our black box of behaviors and take a look inside and say, oh my God, this is how I'm actually operating. The third thing is, as we do that, is we become intimately familiar with our emotional system over time. Instead of something happening in the black box and something coming out at the bottom of it and we don't know why, we open the black box and we become familiar with it. This is extremely powerful. Imagine you're in a warehouse, yeah, and the warehouse is dark and you bump your feet against something and there's a forklift driver driving around somewhere and there are shelves with stuff on it, but you have never really seen it. That's the situation we are in many times, that when something happens, we know that we're in a warehouse, something is happening, but we really don't know what happened, why we bump against this thing or something. Once we turn the light on in this warehouse, we see the landscape. As we turn the light off again, we cannot unsee what we've seen. We know what's in that warehouse. So to transform our emotional system really requires us to turn the light on. And then we cannot unsee that anymore. We can close our eyes to it, but we basically cannot unsee that anymore. The next thing that we can do is always find our authentic emotions. So when I'm sitting in that traffic jam, for example, to just sit there and feel what's going on inside of me. Am I confused? Am I afraid? Am I angry? What's going on? And in this case, let's just say I'm afraid. I'm really afraid that I'm not going to make it, for example. I can just sit with that feeling and just feel it in my body. There's no story around it. There's just a sense of fear. As we can feel that in our body, that fear can over time dissolve. There's a natural path to conclusion if we're allowing ourselves to sit with that fear. So to be with our authentic emotions, it's something that we'll do as we move along in this course. So asking ourselves, what do I feel? What do I need in this moment? Asking ourselves questions puts us back into the present moment. This is a very powerful, very simple tool because we cannot ask questions in the present, in the future or in the past. By asking questions, we are back in the present moment in our direct experience network. This is something we'll do in the next section to become familiar with the second element of our emotional system, which is our polarity. What's our typical mode of behavior when we are triggered? And to become intimately familiar with that so we get to know it. And the last thing which we'll also do in the next section is to choose essence, because this feeling state of essence, there's always an abundance. I mentioned it a little earlier, even if we are sitting in a prison and we don't have any freedom, obviously, we can still sense a freedom inside of us. What if you look at Nelson Mandela, for example? There is still a sense of freedom that we can create in our minds. So there is a possibility of abundance when we go to the level of essences. And we'll look at that in the next chapter. And the last thing that I would like to reiterate again, it's really a tough subject here for most of us, actually. It's not so easy. Just be gentle and compassionate with yourself and with the people around you. Because many of us in these days and times where stuff is hitting the fan, we're all triggered, we're all running around, oh my God, what's happening tomorrow? Just be compassionate and gentle with the people around you and also with yourself. And remember what we did during the first few chapters, who you are, your colors, your personality, that you are here to be that person and it wants to be expressed, and that you are okay the way you are, and also the other person is okay they are. If we can just remember that there's a higher order to everything, it can help us relax and deal with these situations in a better way.
I would like you to add one short thing.
Yes.
If you don't manage to be gentle and compassionate with others or with yourself, still be gentle and compassionate with yourself, because you caught yourself that you did not do it. And that already is a really great step.
Yeah. Yeah, I wish I could do that.
I wish I could do that as well. But if you remember that, then it happens more often.
Yeah. Clemens, do you want to do a little feeling exercise here at this point?
Yes, I would like to. And that is actually an exercise that shall help you to be more compassionate and gentle with yourself. Feeling is so essential because if you look at, let's see, this flame, the flame is not dangerous if you look at it, right? But only when you put your finger in it, then eventually the finger starts hurting. And on the feeling level, the subject side of our experience and the object side, they are coming together. That's where we actually can be in unity. That's where unity is happening. It's not happening. Seeing takes us out. Hearing takes us out. But feeling takes us together. Or taste as well. If you have ever tasted something really hot, then you know, oh shit, it's really a problem. Yeah. So what can help us on that's why we stress feeling so much, really feeling it, not even naming it, just feeling it. It's about just feeling what there is. And my invitation for the next weeks, and that goes back to the question, how do we connect better in these days, is try to find every day for a couple of minutes, someplace in your body where you feel at least neutral or where you have a positive feeling in your body. And the more you practice, the easier it gets. And so for the exercise I'm going to do is, I would like to ask you to sit comfortably but upright. And I will lead you to a couple of places in your body. And if it does not feel comfortable, really feel free to move to another place in your body. Don't stay with the uncomfortable. That's advanced practice. For this time and for the next weeks, try to find the comfortable, the positive feelings in your body. And so really take a moment and see where does it feel uncomfortable, and maybe you have to move your hips a little bit and check your shoulders. How is your neck and your shoulders? And maybe you have to move your neck and your shoulders a bit, or your hands in a different way. You can open your eyes or you can close them. That's up to you. And as a first step, I would like you to feel how you're inhaling. You will feel that probably either in your chest or in your abdomen, or maybe it's in your throat or in your nose. And just feel that automatic inhaling and exhaling. And then note whether it's a comfortable, a pleasant feeling, or whether it's an unpleasant feeling, just on a feeling level. And if it's pleasant, stay with it for a bit. If it's unpleasant, don't stay with it. You don't need to. You can actually try to change the way you're breathing, or you can bring your attention to your hands and feel whatever your hands are touching at that moment. Connect to that feeling, whether it's comfortable or uncomfortable. And if it's comfortable, stay with it. Or if your breathing is comfortable, stay with that feeling. If it's uncomfortable, I would like to invite you to feel your feet on the floor, maybe in your shoes. So it might be comfortable or it might be uncomfortable. And if you catch yourself that you're thinking a word, bring your attention back to the feeling. And then I would like to invite you to check for a second thing. Are you really feeling, or do you have an image in your conscious awareness? Is there a mental image, for instance, if you try to feel your hands or your feet? And if it's more about the image, then try to go back to find the feeling that is connected to that image. You can also check how it is feeling to sit on the chair. Maybe that's a comfortable feeling. Maybe it's uncomfortable. Check it for yourself for a moment. And then I would like to invite you to move on. How does it feel in your navel region? For some, that's a very comfortable feeling. For others, it's really uncomfortable. So if it's uncomfortable, move away. Maybe just a bit, a few centimeters. Maybe further away. But if it's comfortable, stay with it for a moment. And again, check whether you're with a visual image of your navel or whether you're in feeling. It's two different mental functions. And finally, I would like to offer you to feel your heart region, your chest region. It typically has a different quality. And see whether that is comfortable or uncomfortable. And from there, return to your breathing. Take a deep inhale and a long exhale. If you have your eyes closed, when you open them, look at yourself, your fingers, your arms, your knees. And from there, return to the screen. My invitation is to really take it into your daily life, and it can be a pen that you take, something that feels comfortable to touch, to remind you that you can stay connected to your feeling actually all the time, at every moment, without naming it, just feeling the feeling. And if you practice that in a positive way, then you have a great inner resource to work with in situations where the outside is difficult to handle. And that feeling is actually activating your direct experience network, and it is decreasing the amount you're thinking and your default mode network, your autopilot in the brain. It's bringing you back into the present moment. Thank you.
Thanks, Clemens. Welcome back, guys. Any thoughts, questions, experiences you want to share? Okay.
There was just one comment, and you've said it numerous times today, and it's so key for me, and that's being in the present moment. And I find that when I'm asking myself how I'm feeling, it automatically puts me in the present moment because I have to pay attention. And the same thing with my thinking, that if I'm paying attention to what I'm thinking, then I can better understand if I'm reacting and in an existential situation, or if I'm responding with my authentic self. But I cannot do that if I'm in the future or the past. So it really forces me to be in the moment and very conscious about what I'm saying to myself, as did this exercise. So thank you for that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
If I may add, if you're watching your thinking process, Christine, you're probably also watching how you're feeling in relation to the thinking. Maybe not in a conscious way, but if you go back to that former chart, we typically have a mental image, we have a concept, and we have a mental feeling. They are typically all the time there and switching very fast. And then we have in power and out of power. Mm-hmm. And if you start observing those elements, then you can see, where is it hitting you from? What is the difficult?
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Thank you.
I had a question for you, Clemens. You kept mentioning, if you're feeling discomfort in a place, move away from that. I'm just interested. That's a little bit different than some of the body work and that mindfulness or presence that I've done in the past. So why you encouraged us to move away from it versus be with that?
Okay, because simply, have you ever had a fly walk across your face, Jess? Did you like it, or did you say, "Oh no"? Yeah. So did you observe how it feels when all these little feet walk across your face, or did you?
I tried to.
Yeah, but you couldn't for a long time. Yeah, actually, if you just really are in feeling, you don't have to chase it away. Mm-hmm. Yeah, or if you look for a mosquito bite somewhere, if you go for feeling there, you want to scratch it. Mm-hmm. So you go into distance because it's uncomfortable. Mm. You're not observing how the feeling is changing all the time. Mm. It's changing all the time. There's a healing process going on in that scratch, in that bite. Mm-hmm. It's not dangerous if you just feel. Mm. But our automatic reaction is to move into distance and maybe see it from the outside, name it. It's yuck, it's itching, but by naming it, we move into a distance. Mm. To stay connected with the uncomfortable feeling to really stay connected on the feeling level, to really feel, takes quite a bit of training. Mm-hmm. And that's why in the tradition I'm learning, they are saying, start with the comfortable part, train yourself up. And then you know that you can always go back to the comfortable. Mm-hmm. And by knowing I can go to the comfortable in myself, then it's much easier to just stay with the uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And then it's less dangerous. Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or thoughts? Or
Gabriel put a question on the existential decisions. Do we have one existential need, or is it a question of our primary, secondary, and tertiary need?
Yeah, usually as individuals, we are, what I've learned, and I'm not sure whether that's true because it was basically channeled, is that we are being born with our existential decision. Yeah, and we have one existential decision that we are born with. So we are either I'm rejected type, I'm a body type, or I'm a plain type, a safety type. And that this existential decision gets triggered by our environment and then grows into the full-blown beauty that it is right now. Yeah, but we have one.
And I could add a bit of a bigger picture, because whenever there is a self-feeling, then we want to preserve ourselves. So we move towards what is nurturing us. And we reject what threatens us. And even a cell in our body does the same. It opens for nutritious stuff and it closes for something that is dangerous, right? Or it is ignorant about what helps or not. That is the power part. Mm-hmm. So that's something that happens everywhere in nature. But we have one, I would say we know all three, but there is one that is really hitting us if that is not fulfilled, where our wound is. Mm-hmm. And in that, I don't care whether it's being born with it, if you believe in the birth part, or whether that happens during our youth or our childhood, that we don't get enough love where we needed it, or we don't get enough food where we need it. Or for me, it's not being powerful. No matter what I did, I didn't get the attention. I couldn't change anything. That's my wound. Right? Mm-hmm. So one is really strong in each of us. That's how what I would add.
Yeah, that's a good starting point in any way.
And you may feel the other ones, but they are not so dominant in life.
Yeah. So just one comment to conclude here. We use these feeling exercises because feeling is a big doorway into transformation. Yeah. If we don't feel with what's going on inside of us, if we don't observe what's happening right now, the train is passing the station where it's gone. So that's why we're just practicing these feeling exercises a little bit as we move forward, and then how we can use these feeling states in order to transform our emotional system over time. Yeah, so to use it as a compass in our life as well. Okay. Any more questions before we conclude and move into what's up next? 3, 2, 1, go. Perfect. All right, what are we going to do next? So the second step of this black box that we've been addressing here is the polarity. We've so far talked about the existential decision, and the polarity is the second part, which is basically a teeter-totter on which we step whenever we are triggered. So whenever I'm triggered, for example, in my existential decision, I'm not good enough, I obviously can't let that situation sit around and do nothing. So what I'm trying to do is either become dominant or subservient, because at that point I'm operating out of power. In my case, my dominant behavior is what I call almighty, and the other one, that if I would behave subservient, is insignificant. So my mind plays a game to me when I'm triggered, is that I have two choices. Either I can be this insignificant person that I really am, and I'm not good enough, and all these kind of things, and sour and dwell in that, which is obviously something I try to avoid. But I might very well do in a subservient situation. Or alternatively, I become almighty. And these almighty personality types, for example, have a tendency to associate with big shots. So with a lot of money, with a lot of important names, they like to name drop and all these kind of things. So there's a certain behavioral mechanism that is repetitive and typical for these insignificant almighty polarity types. You might just look into the business world and you can see that there are quite a few of us running around there. Yeah, that operate that way. The point is that if I'm operating almighty, let's say I'm joining my venture capital firm and we had 5 billion euros under management and all these kind of things. So there was plenty of money, plenty of important people and all these kind of things to go around. Perfect place for an insignificant almighty. But you can see that there's no substance there. That as I lose my job and it's been taken away from me, this entire construct is crumbling. Yeah, and I'm falling back into nothingness, basically. Yeah, if I'm not building my entire personality based on my authentic power. Yeah, so you can see in the business world that many people are basing their entire careers upon their polarities. they're running around as insignificant, almighty, insufficient, whatever you learn them, and then it's out of power. Okay, so that's what we'll look at in the next section, our polarity, and you get to play around that. With that, there are 5 polarities, and you get to play around with what's yours to learn your typical behavior when you're out of power. And then after that, we'll see each other again in a couple of weeks after you looked at your module 5. And if you have any questions around that, please just give us a call or drop us an email, and we can guide you along. Before we do a quick checkout, that's it for today. Do you have any questions, any thoughts that have come up?
I was wanting to hear your comment about when you mentioned this BMW cost example, and how this person came up with a solution. Do you think that there was a sort of stop moment, and then reflecting that there might be an abundance, a bigger mindset, and therefore a better solution?
Well, he had the solution all along, but the other person wasn't willing to listen. His boss wasn't willing to listen, and he was coming from an out of power perspective, and it just didn't fly because he met resistance. So the first part about the coaching session that I had with him was basically to get him back into power and to really truly own what's going on inside of him, and to express it in a way that's not coming from a model of dominance and subservience, where he wasn't there to manipulate the situation. This is not good enough, I need to keep my people, all these kind of things that were going on in his mind. So when we had that conversation, and as a consequence, this came out with this statement that he left his boss with, it was a very in-power statement, where he was just stating the situation and the concerns and the needs and what he sees his boss needs. We need to save those 20%, hearing his boss, and then come up with an alternative, yeah, and just put it out on the table. There was no attachment, manipulation, or those kind of things in that statement. So it was fully in power, and that's what we usually react very positively to, and in this case, the boss as well. Does that make sense, Michael? Or does that not answer you?
No, yes, and I imagine that there's so many different situations, but that can be applied. I was trying to also get into my mind this thought of abundance, and that there's always enough out there in very difficult business situations, or where you have to take one decision or not, and how this abundance mindset might help. But as you said, good to hear the different ways, perspectives.
I'd like to push you off into the next chapter, actually, because we'll speak about that. Yeah, because when we go to the level of essences, there's always abundance. So can we guarantee that a conversation changes, that we have a solution? No. But what always happens is that the dynamic of a conversation changes. So if we go to the level of essence, let's say there's not enough oil in this world, yeah, which I think I gave the example. If we change to the level of essence of what we really need, which is in this case energy, or those kind of things, or access to energy, for example, there's always enough, and it always opens the door to more opportunities. In this case, maybe renewables or something. There might be another issue around the corner, but it always opens the door to other possibilities if we come from this different mindset. So there's a kind of abundance thinking happening. I'm not sure whether it explains that, but I hope it'll become clear in the next chapter a little bit better. So does that help, Michael?
Yes. I'm sure we'll get into to different situations.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we'll bring it up again if we don't touch it. Okay. Any other questions before we conclude? Thoughts? Okay, let's do a quick checkout. How are you guys leaving this meeting? Moshe, do you want to start from the bottom of the list?
Yes, sure. So yeah, it's cool. Everything is cool. I just want to comment that I like when Peter, when you guys and Clement, when you talk about like your stuff that related to it, and it sounds very real and current, like, I mean, present, like it's something, you're going through every day. So I think it's very cool, in in the sense that you're not coming from any place of you're already mastering it, and it's a work of every day. So I love that approach. So I just want to comment on that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Michael.
Yes, it's feel good. Looking forward to the next chapter in the journey.
All right, thanks. Julia.
How am I feeling? Like I've got a lot of reflective work to do between now and the next call, which is exciting and slightly terrifying at the same time.
Fantastic.
It's a good position to be in.
Jess.
Just once again, love the session. Thank you for that moment of mindfulness and presencing and being in our bodies. I think that's always a really useful reminder to stop and breathe and feel, and just continue to love the content. And thank you both for being our Sherpas through it.
Thanks, Jess.
Thanks.
Gabriel.
I don't know. I feel like I'm carrying the heavy load, but as far as who's the Sherpa here, but I appreciate the journey metaphor for sure. Yeah, I'm feeling at peace and feeling curious to kind of go back and look at this material with a more subtle, different view of the domination subservience model and see how that fits up. And I appreciate like what Moshe was saying about you guys normalizing the process and the challenge, and knowing something about it, right, being able to relate to our experience as well. So I'm feeling grateful.
Right, thank you. Aaron.
Yeah. Gosh, having done a lot of similar work from different frameworks, I'm really fascinated and grateful for the perspective, because a lot of the conversations you have are just forcing perspective on things that both I look at from a broader perspective in this greater industry and from a personal perspective. So a lot of just smiles and curiosity coming from over here, since you can't necessarily see me.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Christine.
So I'm doing very well. I too am at peace, and love the opportunity to continue to understand the self and myself, and really appreciate both of you so much for offering this opportunity, and look forward to our next session.
Thanks. Carmen.
Thank you very much for a really great webinar. It really relates very much with the work I'm doing, and I still need to find my way how I can integrate it even more in what I'm doing with people, because I'm coming a little bit from another point, but it's really great stuff what you're showing to us and, well, teaching us. And thanks a lot to Clemens. I like his meditations. They are really very insightful, and it's an asset to these webinars. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Jordan.
Yeah, I'm feeling really good. I think I've never done this much self-reflection. So it just is, it's a struggle, but it's really good. And I just think that the dynamic material between crossing in from the professional life to the personal life is just, it's really fascinating. So it's been really fun. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Great. Clemens, do you want to say anything?
I'm actually feeling quite well, and I'm happy that I could contribute in an extra way, and happy to hear that it is working in one way or another in all of you, because that means that there's some change going on, and I think that is great. And I'm actually also quite happy, Peter, that you put this program together and all this material, because I think it's great.
Thank you.
So thanks from my side, and great day and a great evening.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, thanks also from my side. It's wonderful to have you and work with you. There's one little thing that came to mind as a last little fun thing. We spend so much money going to movies or renting movies that are exciting and where there's drama and all these kind of things, and all of this is playing out in our own lives and the lives around us. So if we can use this model of dominance and subservience and just sit back on the park bench and look what's going on around you, it's better than color TV, guys.
And look inside ourselves.
Yeah, that's maybe the second step. That's not so fun, but you can start with the first one and observe and learn a lot. So with that, I really look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks. Have a wonderful time. If you have any questions, ping us. And
it's also going to be the last one, I guess.
No, we have a couple more.
Oh.
Couple more.
Right.
All righty. Take care. Enjoy your day, evening. There we go.